I think this is all of them, right?
Yeah.
Did anybody really say there's no aliens and feel bad about it? And I mean, that seems kind of far-fetched for someone to be like, well, I thought there's no aliens and I made some statement, and now since there are aliens, I'm going to hide it. Like that seems a bit much.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would say that you're right. This one has more to do with intentional suppression for can't handle the truth and mixture of evidence of wrongdoing, which would be lying. Excuse me. I think that there's also religious aspects to the can't handle the truth. I think at times that it's blocked because of a government insecurity of concern over the theological interpretation.
And sometimes we have self-mind guard.
Yes.
So I'll put there. So I'm talking about Scientology. That's a great modern example.
Yeah.
And the thing about Scientology, it's a little bit different. Like Scientology had this story that they
Sorry about that.
So out here is the regular schmo, and do audit, and you gotta pay big bucks, and you gotta join this club, and then like John Travolta and
Tom Cruise,
and there's a few others too, like but Scientology was just invented by a sci-fi author. Like it's just a big fucking joke. Do you know the story about Scientology?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because they did a really good job protecting that story for a long time. It all got kind of blown wide open, and now everybody knows it. And so if you're paying thousands of dollars, but the point is that when we're talking about a mind guard, we're often talking about someone protecting our mind from information. And Scientology is the other direction. They're protecting information from reaching minds from their, like you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you mentioned what we might call a slow roll.
Well, and yeah, the slow roll. Before we hit on the slow roll, I want to touch on the self-mind guard. Actually, I talk about that a lot in the group. I actually speak on it. Eric Johnson, I've said it to you in a different way before. A few others, Richardito or whatever, Ricardito, whatever, I can't remember. But basically, I say it like this. Your mind, when you take a person so far to their self-mind guard that they just start like almost Tourette's responses, off-topic deflections and projections, I'll say to them, even your own mind knows if you acknowledge the reality right now, it's afraid of how you're going to respond. It thinks you might do something bad to yourself. You can't even face the reality. That's how bad you've built up this wall. And that's the self-mind. I've said that to people in the group, and I'll say that often. I'll probably say it tomorrow to someone, because that's the reality that occurs in that moment when someone has made either a projection, an assumption, or this core foundational lie to themselves, and then someone is challenging it without budging and citing consistent truths within it. That person gets to the point where they just almost shut down. It's like a malfunction, and they just start completely, it's off topic, it's projection, it's deflection, it's complete, utter, nonsense coming out of the mouth. And at that moment, you can actually say to them, your mind's not even letting you hear the truth right now because your mind is so afraid of what you might do to yourself if you realize you've been lying to yourself this long. That's the self-mind card.
And what you're describing, let me use the right noun too, process shows. When we see you doing that effort, right? Walls take effort. You can ask Trump that. Right? It takes effort to make these walls, and you're making them so this stuff bangs off them. We're going to notice. Like there's going to be pushback. Nothing exists without pushback. That's what exists means. So just for fun, and go ahead and do this in a general way. Tell me about the slow roll.
So the slow roll that I call the slow roll when an entity of some kind has a vast amount of information that they know it's some manner has to be disseminated amongst people, but at the same time they do not want to they don't want to lose power and control, and they make complete rationalizations for why it's okay then to not give the same information to everyone. And the Catholics are a prime example of this, with everything from language to mathematics.
Except you said it's information that you want to disseminate.
Yes, but slowly. So, and here's why. It's actually economical. Because
that's why I figured connecting it to advertising was working.
Yeah. So basically, if you're going to ultimately have information, the purpose of it is to utilize it. You can't utilize it without more people knowing it, but you can't have everyone know it at once, or you might lose control of it. So the only way to apply it is a slow roll if you're a controlling entity who wants to maintain control. So in that sense, an entity acquires control of information, slow rolls it out to the masses. That creates a working populace, etc. I'll be right back, actually. If you want to go on that real quick, my wife just got home. I'll be right back.
Here you're describing is like IP, but IP by being sneaky. And since I don't have a partner and we'll go see some comments, or will I? Hold on.
Did you hear me on that? Sorry about that.
No, that's right.
So where we were at was the slow roll, and where did you hop in on that?
Well, what you're describing, if we're talking about advertising education, we can also say the arts, because you're talking about basically.
And by the way, you're not on your screen anymore. You're on your face. No pun intended.
All right. Nice. I'm just going to go back to the same slide we're done. But as far as I can tell, what you're describing is a scheme where people can protect their own IP without having to rely on any kind of like government operation, right?
So I'll give a great example of this. So the Google search algorithm has never been patented because you would have to disclose it to patent it.
All right.
So that's an example of holding it but slowly disseminating it at the same time.
Interesting. So so going back to our list, which I didn't say like a dope, but we're going to read it from memory. IP protection. This might be another valid reason for mine guards. I didn't even think about that when we were planning this talk, but that's totally up.
Well, yeah, but so here's where this is the IP protection argument as a mine guard. This is the ultimate discussion on the marketplace of technology today. The mine guard versus the open source, the Apple versus the Raspberry, right? The operating system one against the other. And I would say philosophically speaking, open source is better. You'll have better content, but you'll lose control. And losing part of control, you'll have more errors, but you'll have better functionality ultimately, and you'll have more options. So, but those are the two challenges.
That trade-off is actually the ultimate trade-off of life.
Yeah.
In fact, if we identify cellular action with environmental control, the original mine guards the original reason for a guard is to keep that environmental control. But the big question, the big philosophical question is, how much do the mind guards actually succeed, the ones that are out there? Okay, so advertisers want to keep track of their IP. I can't fault them that. If they're making up the information, right? If this information is valuable because they went to the trouble to put it together and produce it, who the fuck am I to say they should give it away?
Yeah.
Right? Public information about things like aliens.
Yeah.
I mean, when Scientology had their stories come out, they tried to contain it, and they really couldn't.
Well, so this is the biggest flaw in the cult that was Scientology, in my opinion, is they had a bunch of idiot actors be the source of it. It was bound for them to screw it up. They're all literal drama kings. So anyway, but to that same extent, that's why a true mind guard doesn't want the publicity as much as they want the exclusivity and secrecy.
Well, it makes sense that there's a distinction, I guess, to be made between being a guard versus being a valve or a filter. Well, wait a minute, though. I mean, a filter is a guard, right?
Well, no, I would say it's a sorting system. So
yeah, absolutely. A filter or a sort or a valve, those all mean the same thing, right?
Right.
Some shit gets in, some shit doesn't.
Well, I would actually put the valve or the filter, though, a step beyond the guard, because once something is in, the filter is what will sort it. So who gets what? So we could take this to the religious level and say, based on your geographical location, that's basically a filter of how you'll believe. But the only way to first get to that filter on a geographical level is to be born, right? So basically, the guard is the womb. Not to get into that discussion now, but once you breach the womb and have life, the filter is geographical location, filtering your belief structure likely.
Well, all of life is filters. That's the point.
Yeah.
At some level, we have to accept that this type of environmental control does exist. So let's go back to the nefarious ones. What are and maybe we'll finish up with this, because I think this is where it gets creepy and weird, right?
Do you want to hit Paul's descent for the most malicious ones at the end, or did you want to hit Catholicism? I'm good with whatever, because those kind of go together anyway to a certain extent.
Yeah, we were going to do Paul's descent. Let's go back and do that. But Paul's descent, I mean, that's a little more difficult, because there's a lot of ideas that different people. What do you think was the big idea that was mainly being suppressed?
Well, we'll have to. Me and you I can't wait to see where we build this up to ultimately. But basically, I think that it ultimately comes down to an argument of was this person who was executed, a Messiah or not, was what the two verdicts were essentially. It wasn't even resurrection based, because at those times, the majority of people actually did believe in things such as godly resurrections and multiple gods. And so the resurrection was less debated than it was still debated than Messiah or non-Messiah.
Paul changed his mind because of a vision. So aren't those visions going to be part of the issue?
No doubt. There's multiple things at issue. You've got discussion from vision, of people claiming visions, and you have multiple people claiming similar visions, and multiple. These, and Paul specifically being one of those who is citing this. So this is going to be a big challenge when you're talking about mind guards, to keep it on topic. because you're going to be taking that as a piece of evidence to these mind cards. And that's not compelling evidence. That's actually evidence against you from a logical perspective.
Well, what was some of the what did Paul? Or you say Paul's dissent? Dissent from what? Which of these ideas was he dissenting from?
So Paul, what not a lot of people understand, was trained under Gamaliel, who's essentially to this day his house. He's the head. He actually went above rabbi. He was the first to go above rabbi. The law was from
say his name again.
Gamaliel.
Gamaliel.
Yeah, and so basically, Paul was trained. If you could envision Jack McCoy as a district attorney, that's kind of what Paul was. And he's a Hebrew district attorney who's executing Christians. He actually executes Stephen, who had walked with Jesus. And effectively, this experience that Paul ultimately is going to have is going to make him do a 180. So he go and why that's critical from a Paul perspective is Paul is an official law. He can dictate law for Hebrew doctrine at this time. And this is why that's more important than and that's why I say Paul's dissent as it, because I actually think that what Paul's doing throughout his time is offering a dissenting view for Hebrew doctrine to the popular belief. So the popular inscribed belief for Hebrew doctrine is this person, while maybe good, maybe shouldn't have been killed, was not the Messiah to this day. Paul's doctrine is that he was the Messiah. And Paul is actively communicating that.
With his Hebrew compatriots.
Correct. And in front of multiple different kings, multiple different rulers time after time, and each time stating, I have kept the law, which effectively in those days as a Hebrew is I haven't had a pork sandwich. I have kept the Sabbath and I haven't eaten, pork. He's saying I've kept the law. I was Gamaliel. I was directly under Gamaliel. I have legal authority. This is my dissenting view. It's the same as a dissent that comes from the Supreme Court.
And Paul was 55 AD when this is happening?
Yeah, by that time, yeah, because it was some 20 years after the execution by the time he's getting back into Jerusalem and offering dissent in front of kings. I can't remember the exact timing. Maybe 60-ish.
So this guy is kind of like the Hebrew SCOTUS.
Yeah. He's like he is at this point.
The Supreme Court of
He is the Ruth Bader Ginsburg of the conservative Hebrew Pharisee who just want him gone.
Nice. I get it. I get it. That's perfect. What did Paul bring as evidence?
So as evidence, Paul, here are the two opposing views. We will leave resurrection out of this. The two is Messiah or not Messiah. Paul is killing Christians who had walked with Christ shortly after the death of Christ on the orders of Roman authority. So what you have to envision Paul as at this point is someone who is executing law. So he's not dictating the law, he's executing law. This makes him an attorney, a lawyer. This is like Kavanaugh when Kavanaugh had his attorney practice, right? So he is the person sentencing people to death or getting people charged with death, putting them to death, and then he ascends to the point of actually sentencing. You go to, he's a judge now. Okay. Then he's Robert Mueller all of a sudden. And here's what I mean by that. There's after the death of Stephen, Paul effectively asks himself a question. Should I be killing these Christians without getting more information first? So the evidence Paul ends up bringing is this is the road to Damascus. People want to talk about the supernatural experience. I'm going to remove that, call it just a moment of conscientiousness. And he's going to go and talk to the main players who walked with Christ, get their perspective, and then match it with his own. and then get witness testimony of the events surrounding the execution, the death, the alleged resurrection, and all of the details that are. So if you want to think about the Russian interference as an analogy, this is what Robert Mueller did. And so that's effectively what he's doing around the events of the resurrection and the walk of Christ as Messiah. He's collecting information from the main players. He's already received. Yeah.
But throughout Acts, he produces evidence. What are some of the things he actually produces?
Well, he performs, and I believe it's an Acts. He performs a miracle of some sort. I would call it a miracle, but he performs his own set of miracles.
No, he does, and he does that a lot.
Yeah.
They mention that a lot. He heals people. They mention the signs and wonders. They don't even get any details. It happens so many times. You don't even talk about it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't know how much I bring miracles to the table, but what did Paul bring from other people, or from the places he visited, or from the things he saw, besides just his own behavior? You mentioned also, and he was also his own perfectly legal miracles, because as a good Hebrew, by following the law, that means you're in God's grace. Maybe that's half of it anyway.
Correct. Yeah. So basically,
also the same way, Moses considered such an upstanding guy that he actually had godly powers.
At a couple points in his, after being in prison multiple times and facing execution, he was a great litigator. I mean, honestly, Paul should be taught in law school. His litigation skills in his own defense were phenomenal. And multiple times he cites his own presence, being able to...
That's what I mean, his own legal escape miracles.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like Robert Mueller and Houdini wrapped together.
Yeah, exactly. Me standing here in front of you today, I say to you, that Christ is real, and me standing here is evidence of such. I should be dead, and you're not going to kill me either.
Wait, do you reckon that this sounds very familiar to me? Do you know where I've heard this before?
Where's that?
The Blues Brothers.
Oh, wow. I think I know where you're going with this.
He's on a mission from God.
Yep.
That's his evidence. I'm on a mission from God. I'm not sure how many guys have tried that, but after his upbringing and his schooling with this Gamaliel,
yep.
And being like a legal scholar among the Hebrews and killing 1 million people, because you know what? That fucks you up, man.
So
killing a bunch of people fucks you up.
Well, and let's talk about...
Just finally twisted in his head and made him feel so special and creeped out that he had to do something different. He just had to change.
Well, and let's talk about real quick, when we're talking about evidence from a perspective like this. So what you're going to take as evidence is behavioral evidence as well, which, such as with Robert Mueller's, even after, his major report, 18 plus months, everything that went along with that, there's still ambiguity within it and still perspective differences and takeaways, right? And so one thing that is matched is behavior. People look at, okay, well, what did Robert Mueller do? And then it's like, oh, he hired 20 some odd, DNC attorneys. So that adds a level of skepticism. So once there's still ambiguity, then it becomes what were the behaviors of those people doing the search. And that's evidence in itself. And so for that extent, what I say when Paul is you have a person who is killing other people. And so we just talked about mind guards and the mind guard of self-protection from unintentional error, right? Paul has every incentive to convince himself that the Messiah was not the Messiah in his mind, because if he convinces himself that he is wrong, he has to also become aware to himself that he killed people who now should not have been killed. So that is in my opinion, a piece of evidence to the character or the behavior of the investigator, the Robert Mueller. If Robert Mueller hires, a split down the middle, RNC, DNC, attorney group. They come back with the same finding. Don't you think that discussion is just even a little bit different? Don't you think that people are less able to go after the behavior of Mueller, right? And that's what Paul does here. Paul actually changes his mind from the most protective state